Hello and welcome to another JNP Trove class review. I'm your host JonNario, and today I'll be talking about the Shadow Hunter. The Shadow Hunter is a physical-based character that uses a bow as a weapon of choice, so his focus is long-range combat. This class has no bonus stat by default, but when you level up the Shadow Hunter, it gets more energy regen, critical hit, and it also gets a 25% to its bonus critical damage when you hit level 30. So this class is easier to get into the higher critical hit and damage than the majority of the classes in this game. Also, this class has a good dodge, so this character has a good speed momentum. The Shadow Hunter is one of the oddest classes in the game, meaning it can be both really good or really bad depending on what you had on it. Now, let's talk about the combat ability and passive as well. Since the passive is very complicated compared to everything else, so I decided to talk about it first. The Shadow Hunter's passive ability is called Dark Whispers, which reads, periodically adds a shadow mark to a nearby enemy, allowing you to see them through blocks. So, the Dark Whispers is what it says. It allows you to see enemies through walls when an enemy is marked. You can tell when a target is shadow marked when you see a purple skull above the enemy. And it gets a purple outline as well. It targets at random and it has a 5-second internal cooldown and the mark lasts for 10 seconds. Also, the shadow mark has a range of 21 blocks, so it has a decent range. This passive has really great utility, and it finds enemies that you may not find normally, and it also gives great bonuses to some ability, which I'll talk about it when I get to that specific ability. Now let's talk about the basic attack with no class gem. The basic attack with no class gem has a base multiplier of 2.5 times damage, which is above average, and it is affected by attack speed, meaning that using attack speed gear is good on the class if you don't have the class gem. We'll get into that later. It has a range of wholly 51 blocks, which is the farthest basic attack in the game. It's so ridiculous that Past Me is going to show you how far the range it is on the basic attack. If you want to know what 51 blocks are, this is the range of 51 blocks. It is really high, and it is ridiculous. So there you go. This is Past Me, so now take it away, future me. Alright, thank you, Past Me. So this class has above average multiplier and the longest range in the game. Then why is it so bad, you might ask? The biggest weakness to this basic attack is the attacks per second. It is the slowest basic attack in the game, attacking roughly once a second with no gear, which means even with higher than average multiplier, it's still one of the lowest DPS in the game, and that's why other players say this is the worst class in the game if you don't have the class gem. Also, it's a single target attack with no phasing properties, so it has a really bad crowd control. Unfortunately, this is one of the worst basic attack in the game, probably even the worst. It has good multipliers and range, but it's really slow and has no crowd control properties. The Shadow Hunter has two normal ability and an ultimate ability like all characters in the game. So let's start with the first ability, Radiant Arrow. And the description is, fire an arrow that pierces through walls and enemies. When fully charged, it deals an additional 500% to shadow mark enemies and consumes the mark. So this is one of the weirdest abilities since the damage varies depending how long you charge it. It takes roughly 0.9 seconds to fully charge the arrow, and the damage can go from a normal no charge 2 times damage, which is very low, to a 7.5 times damage, which is above average. It has a range of 56 blocks, which again is the longest range ability in the game, and not to mention it can go through walls and enemies, so it has ridiculous crowd control. This ability deals bonus damage when you hit an enemy with a fully charged arrow to an enemy that has been shadow marked. The passive can transform this from a 7.5 times damage to a 12.5 times damage, which makes this the second highest ability if you include passive. And one more thing, you can throw down a basic attack without the class gem to reduce the animation recovery from the Radiant Arrow. Past Me is going to show you right now. Hello, this is Past Me again. Yes. What I mean by canceling out animation, it means that when you're throwing down the Radiant Arrow, you have an animation recovery. meaning that you have to wait until the animation recovers so you can throw down again. You can actually spam Radiant Arrow, but that's a little bit of waste of energy, and you might not even have really a long DPS, like good longevity in DPS. What I mean is that you can actually throw down a basic attack with no class gem as soon as you throw down the Radiant Arrow. This only works with no class gem, and it is actually what not a lot of people know. There's a little trick that not a lot of people know, meaning that you can actually dish out some pretty burst damage and you can prolong your energy a little bit longer. That's all I have to say on the animation cancel. Take it away, future me. Thank you, past me again. So, combining the Radiant Arrow with the basic attack, it can dish out some pretty high burst damage. This only works with the basic attack with no class gem. This ability is great, but you won't use it as much when you get the class gem. The second ability which you get at level 3 is named Sun Snare, which reads, throws a trap that detonates on proximity, damaging and stunning nearby enemies. When the trap detonates, it has a multiplier of 1.15 times damage, which is very low, and it stuns for 2 seconds. It has a 0.5 second cooldown, and the trap lasts for 10 seconds underground. The stun refreshes when you hit an enemy again with the trap, effectively making this one of the few abilities that can perma stun enemies. The range of the trap's blast is a 3 block radius, and when an enemy is stunned by this ability, it reduces their stability all the way to 0. Which is best since it means that the enemy will take no more knockback. So overall, this ability is average at best, poor damage, good utility because of the stun, but reduces stability, which can be very annoying in a group play since the enemy will be knocked everywhere. The ultimate ability which you get at level 5 is named Arrow of the Goddess, and it reads, applies Shadow Mark to all enemies within 15 blocks and empowers Radiant Arrow, increasing its range, doubling critical damage and causing it to knock back enemies. So the description is self-explanatory, but I'll tell you anyways. When you activate this ability, it will Shadow Mark enemies in a 15 block radius, meaning all enemies within 15 blocks will take bonus damage from Radiant Arrow and can be seen through walls. It has a multiplier of oh my god, and when you do a critical hit, it doubles the amount of critical damage that you have. So, quick example, if you have 1000% critical damage in your stat value, when you crit, it means that you will be dealing 2000 crit damage instead. Also, this ability has a 3 block radius AoE when you hit an enemy, so it has some crowd control as well. And it can do extra amounts of damage on the enemy that you hit directly. Since this is an empowered version of the Radiant Arrow, it can go through walls as well, but it cannot go through enemies, which loses all the piercing attributes on mobs, and since this is a range ability with no piercing, it means that if you're having a laggy day, this ability might not even connect. This ability is the highest damage ability in the game, so getting ludicrous amounts of damage on this ability is very easy. It's one of the more complicated abilities since it can do direct and AoE damage, but everything that it hit just dies unless it's a Titan boss. This ability has a 10-second duration when activated and has a 50-second cooldown. That's all on the ability. Now let's talk about why is it so important to get the class gem ability. The class gem ability on the Shadow Hunter is one of the most important class gem, and this is why. It's called Shadow Blitz, and it reads, basic attack becomes a rapid fire stream of arrows, dealing damage to a shadow mark enemy and consumes the mark and triggers an explosion. This class gem ability changes the regular slow basic attack into a rapid fire machine gun. It changes the multiplier from a 2.5 times damage to a really low 1 times damage, but do not worry, it also increases the attack speed by 5 times, which means the Shadow Hunter changes the basic attack to a minimum of 500% when you press the attack button. The stat can change if you have higher attack speed on gear, but let me tell you why attack speed doesn't work on the Shadow Hunter when you have the class gem. Trove has an attack speed cap of 300%, so the Shadow Blitz class gem exceeds that 300% cap, so in other words, no matter how high is your attack speed, you will still be shooting at the same rate with or without attack speed on gear. So it changes the basic attack speed's weakness, which is 1 arrow per second with no gear, to an amazing 12 arrows per second, which again is the fastest basic attack in the game. Also, when you hit an enemy that's been shadow marked by the passive, the enemy will explode in a 3 radius explosion, dealing 7.5 times damage to everything around it. Overall, the class gem makes this class from bottom tier to a jack of all trades, so yes, get the class gem. You will have a better time with this class. That's the class gem. Now let's talk about the subclass ability. But as always, I'll let past version of me explain everything about the subclass. But if you don't want to hear anything about it, you can go into the time on screen, or you can click the timestamp on the description, and yeah, that's everything. So if you want to stay right now, here's the subclass explanation. Enjoy. Before I talk about the subclass, I'll tell you how the subclass works. First, there's one character level and one power rank. Levels 1 through 9 gives you the starting tier. At level 10 you get the second tier, then is on a 5 level interval to keep increasing the subclass tier, capping at tier 6 at level 30. And power ranks tier 1 is at 1 power rank, and at 5000 power rank is the second tier, then is on a 5000 power rank interval, capping also at tier 6 at 25,000 power rank. Also, you get a bonus power rank when equipping a subclass. Levels 1 through 9 you get 15 bonus power rank. At level 10 you get 15 more power rank, then is every 5 levels you get 15 bonus power rank until you hit level 30, which gives you a total of 90 power rank. So when you're equipping a different character subclass, this power rank doesn't count towards the tier list. That's why you might see the power rank on a character lower than usual when equipping a subclass. Okay, thank you past me for the explanation. The Shadowhunter subclass Searing Light is a damage over time ability that triggers when you hit an enemy with magic attacks, and it also gives magic damage based on your Shadowhunter's level. Tier 1 on character level is 10 base magic damage. Tier 2 is 60. Tier 3 is 160, Tier 4 is 300, Tier 5 is 500, and Tier 6 is 750 base magic damage. And the power rank is the damage over time, which deals 0.2 times damage, and it takes roughly 10 to 12 times a second for 3 seconds, which means in total it could be a 6 times damage to a 7.2 times damage in 3 seconds, and it has an internal cooldown of 10 seconds. The power rank tiers only increases the chances of this ability to proc. Tier 1, it has a 50% chance when you hit an enemy with magic damage. Tier 2 is 16%, Tier 3 is 17%, Tier 4 18%, Tier 9 19%, and Tier 6 is 20%. Which means if you're powering up a Shadowhunter for a subclass, it's not worth it. This ability cannot do critical hit, which is bad. The only way this subclass I would say is useful is when doing rampage challenges, and it's all about hitting the boss rather than doing damage. Other than that, I would say this is a pretty bad subclass with really low multiplier and not being able to do critical hits. That's all on the Shadowhunter. This is my second favorite class in the game, since playing with this class is mostly holding down a button when you get the class gem, but it's still very satisfying mowing down enemies with your machine gun. It's a very fun class and a jack of all trades, but master of none, since it can do any content but is not the best at anything. That's why I rate it good/bad, since it's bad non-class gem but it's really good when you get it. My gear recommendation is to get critical damage second stat on all your pieces of gear, meaning if you don't have the class gem you can get attack speed 4 stat, and when you get the class gem you can swap that attack speed with movement speed. And the ring you can use whichever you like, since the Shadowhunter has a base higher critical hit than average when you level him up, so critical hit is not 100% necessary. Anyways, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of the Shadowhunter in the comments below. Also tell me which class should I work on the next episode. People wanted me to do Neon Ninja, so that might be the next episode unless more people want another class. Once again, thank you for watching as always, and I hope to see you next time. Take care and keep on hunting. See ya!